everybody. So glad you could join us for whoever's there. I am Johar Harper. This is my channel, and I am back with another author interview. I haven't done it in a minute, but I am back with the first person I've ever done an author interview with, Ellie Lieberman. She's going to be talking about book 2 to the B series. She talked about B last time, and this one is called An Impossible Dream. I'll let her tell you what it's about and talk a little bit about yourself if you want.
Hi, I am the author of 16 books, and like Johar said, the newest one is An Impossible Dream, which is my newest novel. This one follows a character that is only really mentioned in the first book, B, but is a very important character. And this is her story. And it is Sarah survived 15 years playing the perfect little servant, but can she survive the castle? After all, nowhere compares to the castle, and no one compares to the king.
Intriguing. The description definitely entices you. At least it did for me. I have to bring up the questions. I forgot to do that. I have been reading An Impossible Dream, and it has been amazing so far. I'm loving it just like I loved B, so I am very excited to continue, especially since it's more of a prequel, and it's very interesting because like some of these characters like Sarah we heard of in book 1, but we didn't actually get to meet her, and we don't exactly know what happened to her. So I'm also excited about I think you said it was book 4 that's going to be bringing back afterwards, right?
Yeah, book 4 takes place directly after B.
Okay, so I'm excited to see the events after B, but I also am loving seeing the events beforehand to see how things got to where they did in B. It's always interesting to see prequels like that because then you get to understand characters or something. Like I understand Henry a little bit more and Thrall and because like in B you heard about stuff that happened with Henry and stuff sometimes, but it's different to actually witness it.
Absolutely, and it's been really interesting writing the books in the way I have with the timeline the way it is, because there are even things that are said in B or things that are said in Impossible Dream that the entire context changes once you know what happened before, like in the Queen story, which is book 3, or when you find out what happened in like book 4, when you find out what happens to like Maybelle and Gracelyn at the end of An Impossible Dream.
Ooh, exciting. I can't wait to finish it. I'm feeling this book is going to break my heart too. The ending
As a writer, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying the ending of B broke me. I was in tears.
That means, like, I'm so sorry, but also I'm so happy as a writer.
No, I'm a writer too, so I definitely feel that. Like, if I can make my readers cry, then I feel accomplished.
Oh, definitely. Like, I'm looking forward to the one moment in your Callista's Adventures novella series where my heart will just be completely ripped out of my chest and stomped on.
Yes, I am not ready to write that either. Like, it's gonna be sad for me, and it's like I always knew this is how their story was gonna play out, but to actually get there is gonna be sad.
Oh, it's so different once you're in like that moment.
Yes, because it's like we were just talking about. It's one thing to hear about it, like
Yeah.
you said about what Joan's death did to Calista a lot in the original trilogy, but to actually see it when it happens, that's gonna be devastating.
Definitely, and especially because, like, if you read your novels and your novella series the way I have been, where you're kind of reading them together, you already know the effect it had on Callista, and it's been like how many years since then? So to be like that raw in that moment, it's just gonna be, oh my gosh.
Yeah, wait till I start writing the prequel trilogy and you get to Marissa's death, because that will be in there.
Oh, yikes.
More heartbreaking moments. Okay, are you ready for the questions?
Yes.
Okay, you already introduced yourself, so question 1, what's your WIP about? If it's a sequel, you can talk about the overall story, including previous books.
Okay, so Like I said before, that this follows the main character Sarah, who is only really mentioned in book one. You only really get to hear her. She's a very important character to the overall plot. But this is her story, and it's a sort of prequel. This takes place over the span of 6 years, and it's the final year that runs parallel to the entire novel of B.
Ooh, I didn't know
But this one follows Sarah, who is a servant. She's been a servant for 15 years, and she has entered into the castle. And now she has to try to survive the castle and the king and all that comes with that. And it's a sort of Cinderella story.
with Cinderella or Cinderella with Sarah and Fra.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Ugh. The king is truly awful. He might be one of my most hated book characters after, because it's one like we were saying earlier, it's one thing to hear about the things he did, and we really only got to see him at the end of B.
Oh,
But
yeah.
to actually be seeing him through this and see everything he does, mostly to Henry, because what he does to Henry is just beyond. I got to
Oh, my.
a certain scene with what he did to Henry, and I was just so angry for Henry. I was like, oh my
Oh,
gosh, the king might be one of the worst book characters I have ever read.
thank you. But yeah, another reader has compared the king in An Impossible Dream to a circling shark. You kind of see the effects he has on like the upstairs, especially, and you feel the fear and everything that he can do for the downstairs as well. But you really don't get to see the direct effect he has on Sarah in particular until really close to the end. And if you think he's bad in An Impossible Dream, wait until you get to the Queen's story.
I'm not ready for that. But one thing I really appreciated was because in a lot of stories you'll see like the abusive father or whatever, and a lot of times they'll target like one or two kids, and then there'll be the golden children who's basically immune to his wrath, which Briggs, Zane, and Rochelle can be considered the golden children because his abuse to them isn't nearly as bad, you know. And Rochelle does face first look like the stereotypical daddy's girl, but to see that the abuse isn't away from them, like they can't actually fully escape it because they are victims as well. They are still terrible people, but they are in the end still victims to the king and are not even the three of them are not at his level. And I really like seeing that even though they are technically the golden children and they technically don't receive the same abuse that Fra and especially Henry, because he's still the one that gets it the worst, that they're still not immune to his wrath, and if one of them step out of line, they can still get punished, whether they're
Absolutely.
the golden children or not. And I really like that because I don't feel like we see that very often.
Oh, thank you. I try to go for, I mean, I know a lot of situations are different, but I really do try to strive for an element of realism and relatability when it comes to things like the abuse. And in my personal experience, when it comes to some of this stuff, even when somebody might seem like the golden child, like you're saying, they're not immune to the king's wrath or the abuser's wrath. And sometimes the way the abuse looks is different from one child to another.
Exactly. Like,
And it's been interesting because I really feel like writing the books again in the order I'm writing them to kind of go backwards and then shoot forward again really gives me a better understanding of the characters. And Rochelle in particular has been a delight to write in some cases because she is so complex and she has these moments every once in a while that's like a glimmer of possibility of being a decent person and then not quite.
actually, I don't know if this is just me overanalyzing because I like to overanalyze and truly understand the characters I either read, watch, or write. But I feel like with Briggs and Zane, they, even though they still get some of the abuse that they do and stuff, I feel like they as we saw in B, they are so I guess, desperate to get their father's approval to be on, because they don't want to be like Henry and Frau. They want to be on their father's good side.
Oh
And
yeah.
so they are willing to do whatever he says to not get his abuse. And then there's Henry and Frau, who's on the exact opposite side. And then I feel like Rochelle's kind of in the middle because, yeah, she doesn't despise her father like Henry and Frau, but she isn't, at least anymore. Like, I think in Impossible Dream, we're seeing her shift a little bit to the point where at the beginning she felt very much like the daddy's girl who was desperate for his approval. But as the story goes on, it's like she's starting to realize how awful he is, and she feels so morally gray. Like everything she does
Yeah.
isn't for Rochelle. Like it's not about her siblings, her mom, her dad. It's like in the end, like her betrayal to him at the end of B when she kind of helped Henry and everything. Um, it's like she's very self-serving, and it's like,
Yeah.
so when she felt like her own needs were not being met by her father, she did not hesitate to betray him.
I like your analysis. Also, it just tickles me so much that you analyze my characters.
Well, I love to analyze characters. I do that with a lot of characters. But I absolutely love your characters,
Oh, thank
and
you.
like I said, in B, Ari and Henry are probably my favorites. Then in An Impossible Dream, Henry is still a favorite. I absolutely love Frau. I loved him in B too, but I love him more now seeing his past.
Oh, yeah.
And Sarah and Elsby are two definite favorites, but I also really love Gracelyn and Maybelle. It's really hard to pick.
Oh, that means so much.
We have a couple of comments. Rochelle with the suspicious eyes.
Oh yeah, Rochelle's got some. It's been interesting exploring her because in the Queen's story you get her when she is much younger. Because by the time the Queen arrives in Midgrum to marry the King, she's about 6 years old. So you're going to get her from the time she's very young, and the Queen's story ends right before B. So you're going to get her when she's the same age she is in B. And then I have a very fun short story where I explore what happens to her afterwards. And
Ooh,
I have quite the
interesting.
plans for her.
Ooh, interesting. Hello, thank you for joining us. Okay, we got a little bit off topic, but let's continue. Question 2. What is your MC like?
What is my MC like? Sarah is. Oh, that's a good question. So in B, Hayworth had kind of described her as stubborn and maddening, which was very accurate,
Yes.
but also very sweet and wise and having a good heart. She can be very guarded.
Yes.
She has a lot that happened to her in her past that makes it not easy to open up to other people. But when she is her true self, Elsby puts it as it being like dancing in the rain after years of drought. There's just something so beautiful about Sarah Unguarded.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree with everything Hayward said because that definitely describes Sarah. But I love her. I love how she. I one of my favorite relationships is Sarah and Henry. I I just love how she's always so willing to protect him and defend him, and she's risking herself a lot of times to do it, which shows that she has a good heart, even if she is stubborn and pig-headed at times and guarded, because deep down she has a good heart. Even that year when she was trying so hard not to care about any of her friends,
Oh
she
yeah.
couldn't stop caring.
Yeah, when it comes to her relationship with Henry, I don't know if you know The West Wing, but there is this great scene between President Bartlett, and
I don't think
Mrs.
I watched that.
Landingham, and that's a flashback. And she says to him at one point, "You need a big sister, and you don't have one." And that always sort of felt like it encompassed Sarah's relationship with Henry.
Nice. Question 3. What are your other important characters like?
Okay. So there's quite a few characters in Impossible Dream. There is Henry, who I believe you described him as a pure being, which I just love.
I described him as a pure bean and a cinnamon roll.
Yes, that captures
Because
it
he
so
is.
perfectly. There is Fra, who is Henry's older brother. And the love interest. There is Maybelle, who is this mousy little thing in the beginning of the book, and Gracelyn, who at one point is described as both the rosebud and the thorn. You have Elsby, who is the greatest of friends and the worst of enemies. You do not.
100%.
You have Hayworth, who is stern and austere, but also can be very warm and loving. You have the Queen, who, oh gosh, how do you describe the Queen? She's nice.
She is.
You have the three mean girls in the kitchens, Letty, Jenny, and Marie. You've got some of the characters we've talked before about, Henry and Fra's siblings, Rochelle, Briggs, and Zane, who are sometimes referred to as the royal brats, and that's probably putting it lightly. And you have the king, who is just god awful.
Yeah, 100%. I know I said I have a lot of favorite characters, but I do think Henry it might be my number one, just a little bit over some of the others, just because one thing I love, which I don't think we see in characters a lot, which I get it because it can be hard to go through some unspeakable things and still have that purity and that kindness and that goodness. Um, but because I know there's this one TV character who I absolutely love who's been through hell, but she never lost that kindness inside her. And I feel like Henry is so much like her in that aspect. He's been through so much abuse and bullied and just awful, awful things, but he still has this purity and this goodness. Like, I swear there were times where I was just like giggling and kicking my feet, like when he faced the wrath of Briggs, Zane, and Rochelle for trying to protect ants
Oh yeah,
and the butterfly.
the
And it was just
butterfly.
all so sweet. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this little boy has seen so much darkness for how old for his young age, but he still is just so kind. Like, he is not just a prince, but he is technically the heir despite being the youngest. And
Yeah,
he could very well be just like Briggs, Zane, and Rochelle. He could be the worst person alive. He could be just like the king, but he's not. And there's one thing I really liked was him saying like he didn't want to turn out like the king. Or I don't remember exactly how he phrased it, but it was something along those lines.
yeah.
And I absolutely love that because he couldn't be the furthest thing from the king. He's just such a sweetheart, and I absolutely love him.
Well, thank you. The root of Henry's character was always this idea of somebody who, no matter what happens to him, he's still intrinsically who he's always been. That that despite everything negative and awful about the world that surrounds him, he can still be himself. And so the fact that that comes across and that you appreciate that just means the world.
Yeah, because I like that because even in B, like now that I got to see everything he's really experienced, in B, he definitely seems tougher because he has to be, but
Yeah,
he still does have that kindness and goodness that never left him despite everything he's been through.
definitely.
Question 4. If your MC has a love interest, what is their dynamic like?
So Fra's love interest for Sarah and their dynamic is just sweet and endearing and somewhat awkward, and it's a slow burn forbidden love, but they're trying to make it work.
Yes. Yeah. Like Sarah still hasn't fully admitted that she has a thing, but you can definitely tell she does, and it's mostly to the girls in the kitchen. Like she obviously doesn't want to admit that there's something going on, but she's gotten to the point where she's not necessarily admitting that she doesn't like him, but she's admitting that there's nothing going on, which kind of because by saying there's nothing going on doesn't mean that you're not saying you want something to go on,
Right.
And so she's kind of at that point. So it's like I think she's starting to finally realize that she does have real feelings for him, and that's not gonna go away, which is awesome.
And Sarah's the queen of half truths, so you really gotta sometimes, like you're saying, read between the lines of what
Yeah,
she's actually saying.
yeah.
And it's so dangerous for them to be together. So I think for her, there's a lot of it doesn't matter if there's anything going on because there can't be anything going on.
And I think that fear worsened when she saw that one girl got dragged away
Oh
because she had
yeah,
relations with the guard. And if you got into that much trouble for having relations with a guard, imagine having relations with a prince.
exactly.
And it still hasn't said what happened to her. She was probably executed.
That's a very good guess. Yeah.
So yeah, it is very dangerous for Sarah to be with Fra. But I think they both realize that, which is why nothing has actually happened yet, because they both, because Fra cares about Sarah and wouldn't want anything bad to happen
Very
to
much so.
her. And he is just so adorable. I love, because at first he would not speak at all because, he's very embarrassed of his stutter and
Yeah.
everything. But now he's actually speaking to her more often, and it's so sweet because it's showing that he's confident with her. And I always love how even when he wouldn't speak, or when he was trying to speak but couldn't get it out, Sarah was very patient with him and stuff, and she never made him feel bad for his stutter. And it's just so sweet. They're so adorable.
Thank you. That means so much.
A couple more comments. So many cinnamon rolls. Yes, Henry is a cinnamon roll. And they are adorable together. Yes, they are.
Oh, thank you. They're a lot of fun to write, and I think for me, there's nothing wrong with a steamy, sexy romance, but I sometimes miss romances that are just sort of sweethearts together and
Yeah.
that are that more endearing quality to it. And in terms of the forbidden romance too, I think one of the things that makes it a bit unique is the fact that both are fully aware of what their circumstances are and they both come at it the same way compared to one being frustrated that the other one's not willing to do more.
Yeah. They're both very respectful,
Yeah.
which I love, which is something that I feel like is similar to how I've written Calista and Joan in the novellas,
Yes.
because they also have a bit of forbidden love, which you've seen before, and that forbidden arc actually comes back. So there's gonna be more of that. But like, even because they want to be together, but they're also respectful of why they know that they can't always be together. And
Yes, and like, oh my gosh, that one scene in that one novella where Callista's like, it's your choice, and I completely understand it. Like, the idea of consent and the way you write that, being so respectful of one another is just, oh, so well done.
that means so much. Thank you. But yeah, reading Fra and Sarah, it felt a little similar. Like, they're very respectful and very adorable, and they know that them being together would be basically impossible. So
Yeah,
neither one of them have actively tried to cross that line because if they ever did, they would want the other one to be 100% on board, because so much is at risk for both of them, but especially for Sarah. And I
right,
think
and
they're also aware of that.
yeah, and the idea that it can expand past them too, that that their actions have consequences not just to themselves, but the people they care about most. Because the king likes to target not just the individuals, but who those individuals care about.
Yeah, definitely. Like a lot of Sarah Elsby's. Am I saying her name right, Elsby?
Yeah,
Okay, just wanted
that's
to make
perfect.
sure. I was always afraid I was saying it wrong. But Sarah and Elsby, a lot of their fights, like they haven't had that many huge fights, except for when Sarah was having her breakdown that one year.
Yeah,
But a lot of their fights are mostly just arguments, but all friends have arguments, like
Definitely.
it's just like a romantic relationship, there's gonna be fights and disagreements and arguments and stuff. So I really like seeing that because feel like we don't get that
Thank you.
part either. And I'm a sucker for good friendships. Like those are usually my favorite relationships to read about. But anyways,
Mine too.
yeah. So it's not just me, yay. But yeah, I love a good friendship. Like, don't get me wrong, I love a good romance too as a side story, but I will always be a sucker for the friendship first.
Definitely. And in the castle and the circumstances they're living in the kitchens, I mean, there's like 50 plus girls cramped into this one area. So they're kind of bumping elbows. So it felt like, sometimes getting into little spats were going to be
Yeah.
inevitable.
But I feel like a lot of Sarah and Elsby's arguments stemmed because of Sarah's relationship with both Henry and Frau. But I do feel like Henry a little bit more just because Elsby has issues with Henry, which
Yeah.
Elsby's one of my favorite characters along with Henry. And it's like, I see Henry, so it's like I'm a little upset at Elsby for her reaction, but at the same time, I kind of get it too. Because
Oh,
seeing
yeah.
how the other princes are and seeing how the king is, especially since Henry is the heir, he does cause trouble. Like I remember calling Henry and Ari and B a chaotic and dangerous duo.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, so both of them together
Best
and
description
separately.
ever.
So I can see why Elsby has those feelings about Henry, and I also get why she'd be angry at Sarah for being friends with Henry or having this kind of romance since they're not really together, but they definitely it's like it's known that they like each other.
Yeah.
With Fra, and I can get why she's upset because if something does happen, then it's not just on Sarah and Fra. The king could very well target Sarah's friends, so that could put Elsby, Graceland, Maybelle, and Hayworth in trouble.
Yeah.
So I get
Definitely.
why she is upset and tries to get Sarah to get away from the two of them because it can be dangerous, not just for the two of them.
Right.
And I feel like
Absolutely.
I called Elsby. I don't know if you saw this tweet. I think this was more recently, but I called Elsby the protector.
That is perfect. That is
Because
so
I feel like
perfect.
she is. She's like definitely Hayward's second in command. And
Oh, yeah.
I feel like she's the protector of the girls, and I feel like she's like the first to protect and defend, not caring about herself. Like when those guards did come in to take away that one girl, she immediately put herself in front of the three of them without second thoughts. And her little comment about
Exactly.
"What about me?" and it's like that's kind of heartbreaking.
It is. When you really think about it, it really is heartbreaking. But protector is the perfect description for her. Um, and Sarah is in particular is like Elsby's first friend too. So I think there's a lot of that tied to it as well. And in terms of Elsby and how she feels about Henry, there's more to that too that you will wind up learning in book 3.
Ooh, can't wait.
But I will also give a little hint to book 4 and say that how she feels about Henry definitely colors how she feels about Ari when the two of them first meet.
I did see that snippet with Ari and Elsby, and I kind of liked it. Like the two of them, they seem so similar. I feel like they're gonna butt heads.
Oh yeah, it's so much fun.
You said you were writing a collection of short stories? Is it about like B, like the series
Oh
B?
yeah, so along with the main novels in the series, there's going to be 2 story collections. One is a fairy tale collection of all the different stories of the different kingdoms, and then one is a short story collection that will follow a lot of the characters and their stories that you kind of don't get as much of in the main novel series. So you're going to get like one about Elsby when she's younger,
Can't wait.
which is really fun because for everything you love about Elsby now, imagine her with like even less of a filter. And you've got her when she's younger, pretty much. There's going to be one that follows Rochelle after after she leaves off. There's going to be one that talks about Hayworth when she first came to the castle when she was 13. And then if you remember the Auntie Patchett character in B, there's going to be one that follows her as well.
Oh, nice.
And well as a whole slew of others.
Yeah, I'm very excited for the Elsby one because Elsby, I really, one thing I love that since it's Sarah's point of view, we don't get that much of is Elsby's relationship with Hayworth.
Oh yeah.
Because I do feel like Hayworth took Elsby under her wing, and I would love to see that rise from the new servant to becoming Hayworth's second in command, her most trusted person. Like before
Oh
Sarah,
yeah.
Elsby did all the important tasks, and even with Sarah there, she still does a lot of the most important tasks, like stuff with the queen and going out to the market and stuff. One story, I don't know if you plan on writing it, but it's one I would love to see is how Henry and Eacon met.
Oh yes, Henry and Ekin.
Ekin, how you pronounce it? I wasn't sure how to pronounce it.
I've been pronouncing it Ekin.
Okay, Ekin.
But yes, I don't know if that will be in the short story collection. It kind of depends on how long it is. It might wind up being a little special thing that I shoot up for free on Ko-fi.
Okay. We keep getting a little bit off topic, but
sorry about that.
No, it's not your fault. It's on me. I love talking about it because, like I said, I'm absolutely loving this series.
Oh, that means so much.
Ari meeting Elsby, hand orange covering eyes.
Yeah.
Next question is, who, despite the love interest, is closest to your MC? What is their dynamic like?
Okay, so you have the three main friends that Sarah has. There is Maybelle, Gracelyn, and Elsby, and they are all very loyal in their own ways, and all can be pretty funny in their own ways too. But they are just a great group of friends for Sarah. And then there is Hayworth, who their relationship goes through quite the growth in An Impossible Dream. You have Henry, who's the heir, and also winds up becoming this really great friend to Sarah. Almost like a younger brother, older sister type of relationship. You have the Queen, who also becomes a pretty good friend to Sarah as well. I don't know, am I missing anybody? I might be missing a few. There's Ekin, who also is a wonderful friend to Sarah, who is the stable boy.
Yeah. Yeah, he's sweet. I really liked him in B. And I remember gushing over him once, and you were like, that makes me so happy because not many people really talk about him, but I really liked him.
Oh, yay. He deserves some love.
Huh?
He deserves some love.
He does. Okay, question 6. Yeah, 6. What's your world like? Is it similar to our world? Is it different? How so?
So the world of the B series, the first 2 books are really focused on Midgrum, so I'll focus on that one. Midgrum is the Middle Kingdom, and is surrounded by 4 other kingdoms on all sides. Midgrum is dark and cruel and violent and patriarchal and misogynistic and has huge divisions between classes in terms of the haves versus the have-nots, and where B really focused on sort of the outskirts of the kingdom and then heading into the kingdom, the castle itself. An Impossible Dream focuses primarily inside the castle itself, so the world is a lot smaller. Let's see. Yeah. So yeah.
Question 7. If you write fantasy, what's your magic system?
In the B series, there is a hint of magic, or at least a possibility of magic, but it's always sort of called into question whether or not it's actually there. You get to see a little bit of it in B. You get to see a little bit more of it in Impossible Dream, and even the characters themselves seem to have some interesting abilities, like Maybelle's ability to know where anybody is at any given point when she really thinks about it. You also have an Impossible Dream, the start of the discussion of the witch burnings that happened in the history of Midgrum. And that will definitely be coming up even more in books 3, book 4, and the short story series. Let's see. So yeah.
I like that because like most books is like either magic's real or magic's not. Here, especially since none of the actual main characters or characters we really get to see really show much magic themselves, it's like it's kind of like a legend or a myth. Like it could be true, but we don't actually know anyone with magic, so it also could not be true.
Exactly.
And I kind of like that. It's like a mystery. It's like magic may be real, but it may not be real. It's like, do we really know? It's like seeing is believing, you know, like.
Definitely.
And we haven't actually seen anyone with magic that we know.
Right. And especially as the series dives more into the mythologies of the individual kingdoms, and that becomes even more into play with some of the newer characters who will be mentioned or introduced, the questions really start flowing about whether or not magic is real.
Interesting. One thing I really liked was the ghost stories scene.
Yeah.
And then there's several times later on where they keep mentioning a ghost because they keep thinking there's a ghost around after mentioning the ghost stories. So that's also another thing where it could be or could not be, because it's like it could actually be ghosts, but they could have also psyched themselves out with the ghost stories. So it's like, is the ghost actually there, or are they imagining it because of the ghost stories?
And then you have these like little ties to things. So you have in B, it talks about Fra being really superstitious and really terrified of things like ghosts. And one of the things they mentioned, I believe in B, was hearing the cries of an unborn child. And that comes back into play with the discussion in the ghost stories of an Impossible Dream.
Question 8. Do you like to write major plot twists?
I love a really good twist. Both as a reader and as a writer. I especially love it when it's more breadcrumbs rather than boulders. And there's definitely a few twists in Impossible Dream that, when they're revealed, if you go back, there's been hints there all along of
I
these things.
absolutely love that. That's one thing I love to write as well. Like, I love just adding those little hints that seem like they mean nothing until the reveal shows up, and then it's like it was obvious all along. And I am
Yes.
a sucker for those.
Especially when you surprise yourself with them. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've written something and I have an alpha reader who's like, "Did you mean to do that?" And it's like, "Yes, I totally meant to do that. I will claim ownership of this magical thing that has occurred."
I definitely feel that. I have done that more than a few times. There's one. I know you're gonna start reading The Christmas Light.
Yes,
And
I'm looking
I'm
forward
not
to
gonna
that.
spoil anything for you, but in book 2, you do find out how the main character Skylar is actually involved in everything.
Ooh.
Her true role, which was not planned ahead of time,
Yeah.
and but with editing, I kind of like to add little, especially when those plot twists do surprise you while editing. I like to add little details to lead it up to it, as if I was planning it all along.
Very nice.
So yes, plot twists are awesome. I love writing them and I love reading them.
Yes, definitely.
Question 9: what tropes are in your WIP?
So for tropes, there is found family, there is slow burn, forbidden love, royalty, probably missing a few. Those are the ones that come to mind.
I think those are some of the main ones. It can be really hard though, because it's like you can't always think of every trope you wrote because there's like so many tropes in the world, and sometimes you don't even know that something is a trope. You know, it's just an idea you
Definitely.
came up with, and later on you find out, hey, that's a trope. That's been done like 100 times.
Or you have those things that like you write and you're like, so like in B there is technically a one bed trope, but they're not, it's not a romance and they're not in love, and that's not the point of it. So it's like, does that count?
Yeah, definitely. I technically wrote a one bed trope as well in one of my novellas, but it was between two people who were obviously in love, so they just didn't know it yet. But it caught me off surprise because I never thought I would write that trope.
They can definitely be fun to write too.
Yeah, and there's just so many tropes in the world and stuff, and sometimes you might know that something's a trope, but you don't know what it's necessarily called and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it can definitely be hard to determine the tropes that you even write in your own story. Because a lot of times it's not about putting that trope in there. You don't even think about the trope. It's just you like the story, you want to write the story, and later on you're like, well, I guess technically it's a trope.
Yeah, so like with the whole forbidden love thing, it's like, yeah, okay, it was forbidden love, and I guess I kind of knew that going in, but it wasn't like an intention to do it from
Yeah,
the
yeah.
beginning.
I
It was
definitely,
just
I
sort of
definitely feel
writing their story, and oh yeah, it fits into that. Cool.
yeah. Question 10. What themes are in your WIP?
Themes include friendship, love, survival, and dreams, even when they seem impossible.
I love the whole impossible, theme you have going on.
Thank you.
Because there was a conversation where it was kind of talking about a little bit of things that are impossible. There was one quote um that I really liked. I tweeted about it and then I bookmarked it because I liked it, so I wanted to remember it. Um, this one, just because it seems impossible doesn't make it any less true.
Ah, yeah.
I really like that entire conversation, but especially that line.
Thank you.
Question.
Hayworth is a very insightful character.
She is. I swear. Question 11. What was your inspiration for your WIP?
So an impossible dream inspiration, the whole purpose behind writing it was because Sarah, who's only really mentioned in B and everything, very important character, and she kind of went, let me tell you my story, which I was not expecting at all. And B was not supposed to be a series. It was going to be just this standalone story, and it wound up turning into this huge thing. And so I started writing An Impossible Dream, and I knew that there were going to be huge influences from Cinderella, the Cinderella fairy tale, and that was a lot of fun to sneak into the book too. Is all the different nods to Cinderella, especially different versions that I personally love. So you have the like Rogers and Hammerstein version from 1965 TV version of it, and which some of the references include, like there's a chapter called Lovely Night, and that's directly taken from a song. There's a part that's written in there about like how long have they been dancing for, 10 minutes, and that's in reference to 10 minutes ago, which is another song from there. And Ever After is another favorite version of that for me, and you have that whole thing about her just breathing. So yeah.
Nice. I love when characters decide that they want their own story. Good.
Yeah, and that's sort of the way the Queen story has shown up. And funny enough, book 4 wound up being this perfect conglomeration of all the characters you meet and are referenced in like An Impossible Dream and then the Queen story, and they all sort of come back for this one book, which I was not expecting, but it all works out. So
Yeah. Because I don't know if you know this, but there's actually going to be a sequel duology to The Curse's Light.
oh
And
yeah, I think I saw you tweet about that.
yeah, and it's going to follow one of these side characters who was very, very much a minor character in book 1.
Ooh.
But then in book 2, she gets a bigger role. and you learn about her and the MC's past and everything, and she kind of goes through a lot at the end of the book, and then so it kind of leads to the duology, which I have actually started. It's just on hold because I've been working on my Realm Monsters universe, all the books in there.
Ooh.
But when I start the prequel trilogy, I do want to work on that simultaneously and get them both done. So I'm very excited for that because there's this one chapter in The Witch of Light where I just fell in love with her character. Like she kind of goes off on two people, and it was just such a fun chapter to write. And I'm like, yes, this girl needs her own book.
I
So
love when characters sort of become more than you thought they would be. Grayson was
yes,
one of those characters. Finley in this book, in Impossible Dream, she comes back with a slightly bigger role in When Morning Comes. But it's always so much fun when you have these characters that are like, no, wait, there's more to me than just a background set.
yes, I love that too. Like that happened with Raid. Raid
I
became
love
so much.
Rain. They are the best.
Raid became so much more than I thought they were gonna be. But I absolutely love it because I love Rain's character and their past with Kalista and Marissa, which I'm so excited to delve into in the prequel.
Okay, I'm sorry. The one chapter where you talk about Rain's like storytelling
Oh,
magic, I
yeah.
want that. That is so cool.
Thank you. That was probably one of my favorite magic-y things I've read so far in this series. Question uh 12. Are you a plotter, pantser, or somewhere in between? If your WIP is part of a series, how much do you have mapped out for it?
So I am so much of a pantser that it's like extreme pantsing. Like I my writing method is to write what comes and put it into the manuscript where I think it might fall. And when I think I have the majority of it possibly written, I start like stitching it all together into this like quilt. Um, and it's interesting writing the prequels because you have An Impossible Dream, which the first 5 years of the book is a prequel to B. And then you have the Queen story, which like the first 10 years are a prequel to An Impossible Dream. And um I know where the characters end up because I know where they have been in B, essentially. Um but outside of that, it's sort of them showing me how they get there. And I really cannot claim anything that is done from point Z to point A.
I actually get that. I get that a little bit. I mean, I'm more in between. Like there are some things I plot, but at the same time, there's very much many things that come to me in the moment.
Yeah,
So I get that.
definitely.
Would you
And
uh-huh.
yeah, so yeah.
And the queen is the fairy godmother.
Yes, very much so. You get to the point in An Impossible Dream where you realize that she is pretty much like the fairy godmother in the Cinderella story. Pretty dress and all, which will come back in the series.
I like the queen. She's very nice. And what I love about her is that, because a lot of times you'll see royals portrayed more like the king, or even if it's not that bad, like have it be like Briggs, Rochelle, and Zane, like they look down on the servants,
Right.
unlike Henry and Fra, who don't. And you can definitely tell which ones are more like the dad and which ones are more like the mom.
Oh, yeah.
And I just love how she is the queen. She is higher than them, and she could very well act like it. But what one thing I love is her tea times with either Elsby or Sarah, and how she's like sits at the same level as them in those moments. Like,
Yes.
yes, she's the queen, but in those tea time moments, it's like she isn't higher than them. She's just a friend who talks to them and chats with things about them. And it's very sweet to see a royal person betrayed as someone who, even though she technically is higher and could act like it, she doesn't. And she puts herself on the same level as these servants more than once.
That means a lot, and that you see all that in her, especially before you get to her story, that you see all that in her. Because you really, she's, in the third book, you learn that she's been known as the Jewel of the South, that she was this princess who just loved her people and she took her duty and responsibility very seriously. Um, and you catch glimpses of some of what she's been through in An Impossible Dream, and Henry talks a bit about it in B, but you really delve into her story a lot more, everything she's been through, but also more of who she is, um, in Where the Heart Is, Book 3, and identity becomes such a huge theme
Hmm.
due to that. And you really see, I think, more of the influence she's had on Henry and Fra, sometimes without even meaning to.
Nice. One thing I also really like is that a lot of times when we do see or hear about the abuse she sees from the king, a lot of times it is directly mentioned that she was standing up for you. It's usually Henry because Henry does get the worst of it, but sometimes Fra too. Like even Fra, like sometimes he gets hurt defending Henry, and it's like it's really nice to see the two of them willing, knowing that what will happen to them, do it for Henry. And also we saw that once with Ekin,
Yeah,
him risking so much to protect Henry from, because what I feel like makes the king worse, so awful, and what topped him as one of my most hated book characters, and he's up there with some people that is despised by the entire fandoms of those fandoms. Like he is up there. Okay, I hate him, but I feel like what's worse isn't even the physical abuse; it's the fact that he parades Henry around so the world can see the abuse he does on him, which is also mental torture, which in my opinion is
yeah,
worse than the physical because the mental scars stay with you. And
right.
it also makes you understand Henry more in B because I mean, um, Ari and Sarah are guarded too, but with Henry, we're actually getting to see like just how bad his life actually was, and we get to understand why he's so skittish and freaks out if like a hand raises or something. Like you can
Yeah.
understand that now because it's like every time a hand raised, he probably just flashes back to every time the king physically hurt him. And not to mention all the mental crap he put on him. So
Oh,
you
yeah.
really get a true understanding of how of who Henry is in B because of Impossible Dream.
Yeah, the mental and emotional stuff is really hard to deal with, and like you said, you don't have the physical scars, and I think, and this is sort of another thing with like Sayre too, with like the broom scene and everything, is from the outside looking in, it looks insane. It looks crazy. Like there's no understanding for why you would react the way you're reacting. And I think that was really important for me to write. And in terms of like the Queen or Fra or Sayre Ekin standing up for Henry, I think a lot of that also comes from personal experience in being so fortunate to have like the mother I have and the family I have, where they have been, they would throw themselves in the line of fire for me. And I write a lot of really horrible parents at times, but the idea that there's also these parents and these siblings and these friends who would literally lay down their life for him.
And I think that's very important because I mean we haven't gone to the Queen's story yet, so we haven't seen Henry before Sarah arrived. But
Right.
I can imagine just based on his friendship with Sarah and the love the two of them share that Henry, even though he had the Queen and he had Fra, um, he had sort of like an isolation. I feel
Yeah.
because besides the Queen and Fra, the only people he really had were the King, Briggs, Zane, and Rochelle, and they were awful. And
Yep.
I feel like Sarah was brought something. I think they both brought something to each other's lives, if that makes sense. Like
That totally
I
does.
feel like I feel like they both needed each other, kind of like I felt with Henry and Ari in B. I felt like the two of them were like these two. these I can't speak. Uh, like two different sides of the same coin.
Yeah,
And I kind of feel like that's the same way with Henry and Sarah in some ways as well. I feel like
definitely.
both relationships were very important to both parties because all three of them haven't exactly had the easiest life. Henry's by far is the worst, but none of them have had the easiest life, and I feel like they all. I feel like with Henry and Sarah and Henry and Ari, they brought something to each other's life that they desperately needed, and they just didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah, they're kind of like soulmates in terms of being
Yes,
friends.
yes, platonic soulmates. I agree. Which is something I like because a lot of times when you talk about soulmates, you think of romance, and I
Right,
really like it when soulmates are perceived in a way that isn't romantic.
definitely.
Because there's another indie book that I really like that's about witches, and they even act. They don't just. It's not just theorized that these two characters who are no in way any way romantic are soulmates. It's even said that they are platonic soulmates, which
Oh,
I
that is
really
so
like.
awesome.
Huh?
That is so awesome.
Yeah, and I really like that because I feel like we just don't see that very often. It's something I also wrote in my very first series, my Jasmine Perez series.
Mhm.
Um, uh, it stated that soulmates are the person you love the most. It can be your romantic partner, but it can also be a parent or a sibling or a child. It's just the person that you love the most. And Jasmine's soulmate is the person that basically raised her nanny.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and I really liked writing that because I feel like it's just something we don't see very often. Like soulmates are perceived as romantic, but it's not always like that. Like there are platonic soulmates.
Definitely. There's one of the stories of the kingdoms, it's actually the Northern Kingdom, is about how snowflakes came to be. And there is this belief that a snowflake is the perfect half of another soul, regardless of if it is um, familial, if it's platonic, or if it's romantic. And one of the traditions in the North, when somebody important to you passes away, is to make little paper snowflakes in honor of them.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, see, I really like that. I just feel like it's something we don't get that often, and I definitely would like to
Definitely.
see it more.
And it's really important to me when I'm writing my stories to really touch more on the friendships in a lot of cases than the
Same.
romance. I am, there are romantic stories I love. But I sometimes find romance a bit frustrating at times when it feels like it takes over a single character or the entire story.
Yes.
And so I really love writing friendships, and they're so much fun to explore.
Yes, I 110% agree. I know there's one quote I wrote that I know you tweeted about, so you liked it, where Roxanne was telling, I think it was Roxanne said, um, romance should enhance a person's happiness, not be the
Yes,
sole cause of it. And I really
yes.
like writing that because it's something I 100% agree with.
Definitely. There's an indie book I love. I think it's Treasure of Ravenwood, and there's an amazing quote in there about friendship being like the start of love. And I really felt, kind of goes hand in hand with that.
Yes, most of my absolute favorite uh books, the friendship is more important than the romance, if there is even much romance to begin with. And um there was like two books that seemed so opposite from each other, but they're tied for my favorite, and I could not figure out why because they seem so opposite from each other until I realized that they both dealt with like this friend group that was more important than the romance. And I'm
Oh,
like,
that is
that's
so
why they're
awesome.
my favorite. Because even though there was romance, the friendships were shown to be more important than the romance.
Right. And, if you are going to have romance, I do think that it is so important to be able to show some type of level of connection the way you would with friends.
Exactly. And I love a good slow burn like with Sarah and Frog because you're getting to see it built up. Like I'm not a huge fan of when I read about love at first sight. Like
Yeah,
I like more depth to it. I don't like them because I feel like love at first sight just feels so much like vanity, like you cannot understand a person just by looking at them, and it just feels like you're falling in love with the way they look, not with for who they are, which a relationship like that can't last.
Which was why it was so important in Impossible Dream to have Sarah realize that what she fell in love with in terms of Frog was his laughter and his joy, which was also something I feel like a lot of other characters don't necessarily associate with him. So the idea that even when she first meets him, she's at least starting to see something somebody else might not have noticed.
Yeah, definitely. And like my main romances in all my stories, like there's something hidden beneath, it's not
Yep.
just, hi, I like you, all that, like in my first series, they weren't flat out enemies, but they did not like each other until they got to know each other. Then there's I was portrayed the then in the Curse's Light, it's a friends to lovers situation. So
That's
you get to
awesome.
see that slowly coming.
I'm looking forward
And
to that.
so yeah, that's kind of a slow burn too. So that was a lot of fun to write. And then the Khaleesi and Joan was obviously enemies to lovers. They could not stand each other.
Oh
And
yeah.
so yeah, I absolutely think, there should be some hidden depth. And so I don't buy the whole love at first sight. And I love a good slow burn. Those are usually some of my favorites because it's like it's it just comes so naturally. Like
Yeah.
one of my favorite compliments you gave me was when you said that even though Khaleesi and Jones enemies to lovers arc was kind of in the first novella, you loved how I kind of made it feel natural progression rather than just
Yes.
rushed.
Oh my God, the development of like all of your characters feels so incredible and so natural. Even when you have this more like, oh my God, I forgot the witch's name in Realm of Monsters. I'm so sorry. What's
Oh,
her
is
name?
Isabella?
I'm sorry.
Isabella?
Yes, thank you, Isabella. The way like Isabella is with Roxanne in the beginning, and you can kind of start to see them like Isabella start to understand Roxanne a little bit more, and like their development to go from this like almost enemies to like sort of tolerating each other, and like I'm really excited to see how it goes in book 3 of your
There
Realm of
is
Monster
one
series. But
sorry,
even
go ahead.
like the way you develop those types of close relationships is just so natural, unfolding, and just it's beautifully done. It's just chef's kiss.
That means a lot. There's one conversation between the two of them in book 3 I think you'll absolutely love. But I feel like you do the same thing a lot of times. Like even with smaller relationships, you really get to see that progression and it feels natural. And even though it's in one book, there's 6 years passing, and it doesn't, even though it is one book, even if it is 800 pages, it to get 6 full years in 800 pages can be a bit hard. And I feel like you do it great, and I
Oh,
absolutely
thank
love.
you.
And it doesn't even, like, every time a year passes, it doesn't, it feels like it's actually been a little while. And it's like, so it feels like it could be an actual year rather than just however long the pages were to get to that year. And so
Oh my
you definitely do
gosh.
that too.
Thank you. Oh, such high compliments.
We have another comment. Hello, Robin. Thank you for joining us. Really enjoying this in depth conversation the two of you are having. Haven't read Ellie's book yet, but I'm definitely interested.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot.
I am 75% into An Impossible Dream, which is book 2, and it is amazing. I am loving it. Okay. Question. Where are we? I have no idea where we are. We got off topic again. Question 13. Who's your favorite character to write in your WIP? If it's your MC, then who is the second?
Okay, so this is really hard to answer because I love all my characters so much, and for as much as Sarah is the main character in An Impossible Dream, it's really this like ensemble cast, and there's so many of what my grandmother would always call the little stories, that sort of play out. So even though you're following like Sarah, you're still getting a bit about Maybelle and a bit about Ellsby and a bit about Graceland and Hayworth and what's going on upstairs and stuff like that. So it's really hard to say I like writing one more than another. And then I'm also like working on the Queen story and book 4 at the same time. And where I am at book 4 currently has characters like Graceland and Maybelle and Ellsby and even Hayworth as like you get their perspective of things and are really like in their head too. So it makes it really difficult to say one way or another.
Yes, I feel that. It can be hard, especially when you have so many characters and they're all great in their own way.
Oh, thank you.
So,
I
yeah,
enjoy writing them.
like I said, it's hard for me to even pick a favorite character as a reader, let alone as a writer. They're because I feel like they all have their own personalities, their own deaths, their own
Yeah.
story, even though
And
it's
they're so real, right? Like when you're writing a character, they feel so real to you and they
yeah.
live rent free in your head 24/7.
Yes. 100%. Question 14. What's the dynamic like between your MC and villain? If it's not fantasy, then the main character toward your MC.
So there are a couple different antagonists that Sarah comes up against. You have 3 of the girls in the kitchens who are Letty, Jenny, and Marie, who are like your classic mean girls, and they're just a bunch of awful bullies, really. You then have the royal brats of the upstairs, Briggs, Zane, and Rochelle. And Rochelle's the princess, and she's complex and dynamic and difficult to pin down what her true motives are sometimes. You have Zane, who is this brainless, forgettable, nothing of a character, really, who kind of, just follows along with what Briggs and Rochelle
I've
does.
noticed
And
that.
then you have Briggs, who can be a bit of a mini-me when it comes to the king, can be awful and abusive in his own way.
He's definitely the most like the king.
Yeah, definitely the most like the king. And wants to be most like the king.
Yeah.
And then you have the king, who is just awful. He's abusive and cruel, and the cruelty is the point. And it's one character described him as a shark circling, smelling the blood before he goes for the dive in terms of an impossible dream, especially towards Sarah. You see a lot of what he does to the people upstairs, primarily Henry, the Queen, and Fra, and you have a real sense of the threat he poses to the downstairs, but you don't really get to see what he's going to do to Sarah until the end of the story. And the other thing to keep in mind is as you move forward in the books, you also have all of the stuff he's done to the other kingdoms that have only really been touched upon to up until this point.
Yeah, definitely. He is definitely the worst. Um, like I mentioned the scene earlier about when he had that girl dragged for her relations with the guard. I feel like one thing that makes that scene so chilling is the way that he literally does not speak the entire time. It's like he feels like he's too above to even speak to the servants, and he like all he does is basically points to a girl and the guards drag her away, and it's just so silent because the girls are too afraid to even talk or anything, and the king doesn't say anything. The guards are also silent, and it makes it that much more chilling.
Thank you. I will need to keep that in mind going forward when I write. Good to know.
When that happened, it's like it just felt like something the king would do. Like even though, because I feel like we still haven't actually gotten that much of the king in this
Yeah.
book. You say we get more of him later on at the very end, right?
Well,
Well,
you get a little bit more of him later on, more about the threat he poses directly to Sarah. It's not really until the Queen story that you get a lot more of him.
Well, like the scene when the whole dinner thing and Rochelle trips, and he was also rather silent during that, except for when he told her to sit down and stuff. And I feel like, I don't know if you did this on purpose, but I feel like it has become a trait of him. Like, unless he gets angry enough to actually yell or whatever, he seems like he is very silent, which is very chilling considering who he is. It's like he should be chilling, and and I just feel like that whole silence he has, just makes his chilling factor 10 times, because it's like it's the silence. Like, it's like, even though I'm not in the story, I feel like I am, and I can feel that silence eating at
Yeah.
me, and so it just makes it that much worse.
And yes, totally meant to do that. Yeah.
Take credit for it.
he's he's a bit of he really is this he's known as the Shadow King to the other kingdoms, and he really, I think, embodies that in the first two novels as being this shadowy figure, the sort of the monster in the closet. um and there's definitely more to him that you see in the Queen story, where he's not quite as silent as perhaps you would like him to return to being. But yeah.
Well, I feel like that would be different because with the Queen story, you'll see him more. Because right now, you're basically in the servant's point of view.
Right.
Mostly Sarah's, but you do see a little bit more of the other servants. But it is primarily of the kitchens and the servants. And the only time you really get to see the upstairs is when Sarah, Elsby, I can't speak, or someone goes up there for whatever reason because they have to. And so you don't actually see the upstairs that often unless one of the servants has to go up there. And it's usually Sarah or Sarah with somebody, since it is from her POV. Um, but I feel like it'll be a different story if the king is just faced with like his wife or his children, because
Yeah,
yeah, he does have that silence chilling thing going on for him, but I feel like that's more suited when it comes to servants and stuff. But when it comes to
definitely.
family, um he has more of a neat reason to talk and get angry with them, if that makes sense.
It totally does. And I think, again, there's what I strive for is realism of abusive situations. Um, and there's oftentimes it feels like there's two different people when you're dealing with an abusive situation sometimes, where you have the person that the rest of the world sees, or somebody else, that the person who's interacted with at work compared to the person who's at home, and it can sometimes like change on a dime.
Yeah.
um and like in B, most of what you see of the king in B is through like Henry's memories and stuff. So I think it kind of goes along with like what you're saying with An Impossible Dream, where he won't even deign to talk, essentially, because he doesn't have to.
And I feel like that's it. Kind of, an Impossible Dream really shows where the king and the queen differ, because, like I was saying earlier with the queen, she very much sits down with her servants when they have tea time and stuff, and she basically essentially puts herself on the same level as them and talks to them like a human being, which as the queen she does not have to. Then the king won't even deem necessary to talk to a servant because he just sees himself as so much above, which really puts them on opposite sides and shows how different they really are.
Yeah, that's awesome that it shows that type of comparison. I'm really glad that comes across. And in Where the Heart Is, the Queen story, book 3, you also have the queen who really pushes the king in some ways, really good at pushing his buttons and getting him to break that sort of, I'm above you all. type of thing.
Yeah, I'm interested to see that because, like I was saying earlier, how we're finally getting to see Henry's abuse, which we heard about in book one but never got to see. It's kind of the same when it comes to the Queen and Frog. We haven't actually seen much of their abuse. We just hear about it, and it's usually described as them defending or trying to protect Henry, which is why it's caused. And I'm really interested to see the Queen and maybe even Frog. I'm not sure if you're really going to get into his abuse, but see their abuse a little bit more because it's kind of like Henry with book one and book two. Like we heard about it and now we're getting to see it. And now we're hearing about their abuse and maybe we'll finally get to see a little bit more of that.
You definitely get to see a lot more of both of them and what they go through at the hands of the king in Where the Heart Is. And their relationship with each other too, Fra and the Queen, is so very complicated. And that's another thing that's really only touched on in Being an Impossible Dream. And you get to see it fully play out in Where the Heart Is. From the moment the Queen arrives to the castle to the very end of her story.
So the third book is going to be from when Henry's really little, right?
Yeah, so the third book takes place when the Queen first comes to Midgum when she herself is like 17 years old.
Oh, cool.
And you're actually going to get to see a little bit before Henry is born.
Oh.
Then you get to have baby Henry and little Fra when he's like 4 years old with big eyes and all curls. And it goes all the way through An Impossible Dream and right up until the beginning of B.
Right, because we heard about what happened to her at the beginning of B.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We have another comment. He's like an evil cat playing with his prey.
Yeah, that's a great description of the king. He gets his enjoyment and amusement from playing with everybody.
Yeah, and I still think it's especially so with Henry. Or maybe I'm just saying that
Yeah.
because I've seen it with Henry the most so far. But I just still think the worst thing he does is when he parades Henry around so the entire kingdom can see what the king does to him. Like
Yeah.
that is beyond mental, mental and emotional torture. And the one that broke my heart the most was when after the king had burned his feet, and then
Yeah.
forcing him to walk and around. That was just beyond cruel. Like that broke
Yeah.
my heart.
Oh
That
yeah. Um Yeah, and there's a reason why a lot of his attention is focused on Henry, and that gets covered more in the next book as well.
Ooh. Can't wait. Because it's something I never understood for in like real life when parents do target one or two more siblings more. And it's like, why? What did those children necessarily do? Like, obviously, they didn't do anything to deserve what they're getting, but it's like there has to be a logical explanation why the parents would choose to target a certain child.
There's definitely a lot of psychology that goes into those types of decisions that winds up just sucking for everyone involved.
Definitely. Question. That's where I'm at again. 15. Without being too spoilery, what was your favorite scene to write in your WIP so far?
This is another really hard one. I really like writing friendship scenes. I really had fun with like the vengeance scenes where they get back at other characters. Um, yeah, like I'm pretty sure you already got there with the whole thing with Rochelle and the shoe breaking.
Oh,
That was a joy to write.
I loved when Elspie attacked. What was it, Letty?
Yes. Oh, but he so had that coming.
Yes.
I really enjoy vengeance scenes. You have the Cinderella scene, which I don't think you've gotten to just yet, which was really the root of this story. It was sort of like what I had to begin with for Sarah's story, and I had to like work out from there. Um, I think the other thing I really enjoyed doing was fleshing out the development arcs that you kind of got to see in B. So at the end of B, you meet Maybelle, and there's this one line that like Ari says about wearing that she wore confidence like a hand-me-down coat that didn't fit her right or something like that. And so knowing that Maybelle starts off as this mousy little thing, it was really fun to write these scenes that take her a step closer to where she winds up in B. Or like everything Hayworth says about Sarah to Ari when she's describing her about being, maddening and stubborn and all this kind of stuff, but her voice is so filled with grief. And it's just been so much fun to write them starting out where they are just so on opposite wavelengths from each other and can't communicate well, to Hayworth finally feeling like, Sarah's hers.
Yeah, nice. I definitely love growths. Like I love personal growth, and my favorites are the ones like. Don't get me wrong, I love redemption arcs. I have one in The Curse's Light. I love a good redemption arc. Um, and having like a character go from evil to good, or even good to evil. Those can be interesting.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely.
but my favorite girls are usually these subtle ones where they are still are who they are essentially, but
Yeah.
their personal growth is subtle because that's much more realistic. And even though the other ones are fun and I do love to read them or write them or whatever, I love a good subtle growth even more because you get to
Yeah.
see the person from however they grew, whether it was from being hard and cold to learning to love, kind of like Kalista, or from being soft and quiet, kind of like my MC in The Curse's Life, Skylar, to gaining confidence and becoming who she was always meant to become. And I love
Right.
these growths because they're just so subtle, but the person doesn't lose who they are inside. They just grow into who they were always meant to be. And I absolutely love them. I think you do that so well. Like
Well, thank
Stairs'
you.
growth, I loved. I've been loving Maybelle's growth. She might be one of my favorite growths because I absolutely love the scene when Jenny was trying to, rile her up, and
Oh,
Maybelle was just making these little snips and stuff, and things ended up turning back onto Jenny, and everyone was teasing Jenny rather than Maybelle, and I absolutely love that scene. It had me cracking up because I feel like a few years beforehand, if Jenny was there and she was trying to do that, Maybelle would have totally been crying, crushed,
oh yeah.
whatever. But seeing her now being able to do this and not be affected by Jenny's mocks or whatever anymore is just such an amazing growth and so beautiful to witness.
Thank you. I cannot begin to tell you how much that means to me. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Especially because you write those types of things so well. And so it means a lot when you have a writer like you who does something like that so well. And then you like compliment my book, and I'm just like,
It's funny because I feel the same way when it comes to you. Like, I feel like you write these stuff so well. So when you compliment my novels or novellas, I am like, well, coming from a writer like you, that just means so much to me.
but yeah, I agree with you that it's the subtle arcs that just are so beautiful, in my opinion,
Yeah,
too. There's such a
definitely.
beauty to subtlety, and it's,
Yes.
again, it comes back to the breadcrumbs versus boulders.
Yeah, I definitely prefer breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
Question 15, no, 16. If you're writing a series, do you like to ending on cliffhangers? Do you plan to end on a cliffhanger in your current WIP?
I, um, in terms of writing, in general, am not the biggest fan of cliffhangers to end a book with. Um, Reading it is a different story. You are like the queen of cliffhangers, and you do it so well, and it's
You?
so agonizing as a reader to be like, but I need to know. But in terms of my own writing, I like to leave some things open, but I try to, I think there's a reality to not always having everything answered necessarily.
Yeah.
But I do try to wrap up at least one of the main plot points. Um, I know an impossible dream leaves quite a few things open, but the ultimate goal is to have each book kind of be its own little packaged thing that can be read in any order and stuff
I
like
noticed that with B, because I feel like I don't want to spoil anything for anyone out there who has not read it, but with the ending, I felt like with how things, I'm trying to figure out how to word this without spoiling, and I think you know what I'm talking about when I say spoiling, but this certain thing happens, and then with one of the main characters, her ending is kind of open ended, Ari, and it's like you don't know where she's going to go next, but it's
that. Yeah.
also not exactly on a cliffhanger, so it is more open ending, and I kind of like that, because don't get me wrong, I love a good cliffhanger. I obviously love writing them.
And
um
you're good at it.
thank you very much. uh and I like reading them too, but at the same time I'm like you, and I'm like, but I have to know what happens next. But I also love a good open ending where there's obviously going to be more, but
Yeah.
then it also closes. Like both Harry Potter and Percy Jackson have done that. Like each year it closes that particular story, but there's always the threat of Voldemort still looming over, and if that threat only intensifies as the story goes on. Same with Percy Jackson with the threat of Luke and the Titans and stuff. The story from that book is closed, but that threat still looms over, and you know there's going to be more because that final battle still has to happen.
Right. Definitely. And I will say that there are certain things that are not necessarily main plot points to the B series that you will not always get an answer to either. Like there are going to be some loose threads that is, in my opinion, where some of the reality comes into these stories, because sometimes things happen to people and they walk out of the story or your life and you don't know what happened to them next. And I do think that that's kind of okay too,
Yeah.
to have a little bit of that.
Yeah, I agree. And I like that you have that reality. It's like with your series there's obviously the fantastical element, but then you also have that reality element as well. Question 17. What's a scene you want to write in your WP that you're excited for that you haven't gone to yet?
Um, so I think some of the things I'm really enjoying writing in Where the Heart Is, which is book 3 of the series, is those like scenes that are sort of overlap scenes with other books, where you're going to get certain moments from like the queen's perspective. So like in Impossible Dream, you have when Sarah first meets the queen, and you see that from her perspective,
Ooh.
and the idea that excuse me, in Where the Heart Is, you're going to get that same exact moment but from the queen's perspective. And it's been fun to try to write these scenes to see it through somebody else's eyes, but also without being too repetitive, so to keep it
Yeah.
interesting for continuing readers.
Yeah. I definitely like that. And I feel like that's also something we don't get very often. And I really like uh seeing like similar scenes from different POVs, because then it's like it's essentially the same, but at the same time the character could be completely different, have a different mindset and everything.
Right.
So it can be the same scene but still feel completely different because of who is being the narrator, basically.
Definitely. And just like with, different people, that you kind of pick up on something somebody else does not pick up on, or something catches your eye that, didn't catch the eye of somebody else either.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with like the Queen story too, you have everything that came before that colors the way she thinks, and she's, analyzing Sarah compared to everything Sarah had before that adds to how she's analyzing the queen.
Yeah. I'm very excited to see that through the queen's perspective.
Thank you. I look forward to having you read it.
Question 18. What's your favorite thing to write about? A certain type of scene like fight scenes or romantic scenes and so on?
Oh, that's a good question. I like writing like really emotion character driven scenes. I feel like I tend to lean more towards emotion in general when writing. Um, I've also been having a lot of fun playing around with like exposition and descriptions of late. So
Nice.
yeah.
I love a good emotional scene too.
Yeah.
They're fun to read, they're fun to write.
Definitely. And I think that also, at least for me personally, is such a great way to get into a character's headspace, is to see it through their emotions almost, what's going on and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Like having it be more about seeing rather than just talking, you know? Like that's
Yeah,
a very big point of writing. And it's very important to do that. So emotions help a lot to really see and understand, you know, their mindsets and how they're feeling, and it kind of puts you in the set of the scene.
definitely. And like one of the things too with writing about, cruel torture and abuse and everything is sometimes I think it's not about necessarily showcasing the horror of the exact torture, but seeing it through the emotion of the characters. And in some cases, I feel like that can even be more respectful to the characters themselves, because it's not about the cruel act that happened to them. It's not about the abuser. It's about what was done to them. And there's almost that element of recentering the narrative to the individuals who are surviving rather than the abuse that occurred,
Yes,
if that
definitely.
makes sense.
No, it definitely does. I definitely understand, because that's something I also do with my Realm Monster series because of everything Kalista has survived and stuff. And even
Definitely.
though we do see some of it in the flashbacks, a lot of
Right.
a lot of what happened is very much in the past. And a lot of the Realm Monster trilogy, especially the Queen of Monsters, I think you're gonna really like this one, is about her finally trying to get past her trauma and PTSD and actually move on, because she's been holding on to the anger and the hatred for so long. And I feel like it's the same with Sarah, you know? She kind of has to try to move on from that
Definitely.
pain and stuff and finally let go and try to be happy, which is something Kalista struggles with a lot.
Oh man, your Queen of Monsters book sounds like it's going to be really powerful.
I hope. I'm very excited for you to read it.
I am looking forward to it greatly.
Question 19. What do you love most about your WAP and the series overall?
That's a fantastic question. I I really like my characters in this series. They feel so real to me, and I have such a joy in telling their story. And their stories are very, very dark, but essentially the characters are sort of the light in the darkness of their
Yeah,
own stories.
I like that. I like the way you describe that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I feel like it is important too, because I know there's always that conversation about plot driven or character driven. Me personally, I like to think that I write both, because I feel like there's plenty of plot, but there's also
I can
plenty
see
of
that.
character. And I feel like you're the same way. Like there's definitely very much plot in your story, because the
Oh,
plot's
thank
very
you.
important, but also the characters, they individually and their relationships are very important. And um, and I feel like, because there's always that conversation about plot driven or character driven. For me personally, I think both are important, because I feel like there has to
Definitely.
be some sort of a plot to keep me hooked, but at the same time, I have to like the characters a decent amount, or I'm also gonna get bored, because it's like, why am I following these characters that I don't even really like?
Right.
You have to feel invested to them. And I feel like it's the same thing with the author. You have to get that emotionally involved with your characters. You have to love them, and you have to
Definitely.
hurt when they hurt, even though you're technically one causing their hurt. Or debts or whatever, and
Yeah.
be happy when something finally goes right for them, especially when they do feel so much pain. It's so amazing to finally have characters, even just for a moment, be happy, because these stories are usually pretty sad and they go through a lot. Like, we also
Definitely.
torture our characters, and so I feel like it's very important to have that connection with your characters, to love them and to want them to be happy, with also obviously causing them pain at the same time, but being sad that you have to cause them pain for the story, if that makes any sense.
It totally does. I totally understand. I mean, I 100% agree with you too that like character and plot influence each other. So
Yes.
it's kind of hard to separate them in a lot of cases. I feel like personally I am not the most like if you were like do you feel more confident with plot or character? I would definitely say character. So it meant a lot that you were invested in the overall plot of my stories. That makes me feel so much better as a writer. Um, but yeah, I think the other thing too that really separates some writers from others is the level of respect I sometimes feel a writer has for their character. And like you are someone who it's so clear that you love your characters, but it's also so clear that like you respect them and you respect your readers. And that is so huge.
That means so much to me. uh, Another thing is I feel like the characters, like, how am I going to explain this? Is like the characters in the story have to match. That
Yes.
makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
um, my current series, other two series aren't necessarily light. Like, there are some dark things that happen, but this series is so much darker than my first two series. Like, a great well. And my first two MCs, I mean, yeah, they're tough and stuff, but they have to learn to become tough because of all the hell they go through in the story. And they're very much different than Kalista because they're more on the sweet and kind side, and I would never hurt a fly side. But then there's Kalista, who most of her pain and trauma happened before the story even starts. So you don't even see
Right.
how she became like this until you get to the flashbacks in the second book. And then the novellas and prequel trilogy will also help you show how she got to who she became. And she very much isn't afraid to kill us. She has to. And
Right.
and I just feel like it's very important to have your characters match your story, and whether it's the tone or the plot or whatever, because like I said, my first two stories, even though they did have their dark moments, they were a lot lighter in comparison to my current series. So the characters were also a lot lighter, and they were nicer and softer and just wouldn't kill. Like that's a huge thing that my first MC even has to deal with, whether or not she is willing to sacrifice her own morals and kill the villain, um or whatnot, because it's just not who she is. But then there's Kalista, who obviously would do it in a heartbeat. And because this
Definitely.
series is just so much darker than my first two, so it's required a much darker MC.
I also think a lot of it comes into meeting your characters where they're at, like you're saying. If you were to drop, a character from the Curses Light trilogy from the very beginning into Callista's story in the very beginning, you would have to have them have those types of realistic responses to these things. I also think the other side of it too is your ability to write such different characters. I think uniqueness of voice and allowing each character to be their own thing is huge
Yeah.
and takes a lot of skill. And oftentimes they come in with their own voices too. So to be able to honor that as well is, I think, really important.
Yeah, and I think, like, with you and I, we both have, even though there's obviously the one MC, Kalista and Sarah, there's also a lot of other characters that have their own important story arcs happening at the same
Right.
time. And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
very important to have each character have these distinctive personalities so that they are I can't speak, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Definitely memorable.
Yes, I just for some reason my voice would not. My brain and mouth are just not connected right
I
now.
am there all the time. It's amazing that I have been able to get through this entire interview without going blah, 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 blah. So
But
I'm right there with you.
yeah, but so it's very important to have these other characters that are important in their own way, and they are important to the story as well, just not as important as the MC, obviously. And
Definitely.
it's very important to have them have their distinctive personalities, and I do think you do that very well because
Thank
I
you.
mean, like I said in one of my tweets, Sarah and Elspie are a lot similar, whereas Gracelyn and Mabel are similar, which is funny because Sarah and Gracelyn came together and Elspie and Mabel were already there, but then they
Yeah.
just clicked with these other people because they saw something in themselves, even if they wouldn't admit it, because they're so much similar. And
Yeah.
I feel like Gracelyn and Mabel had to learn to rise up a little bit to become more confident and tough, where Sarah and Elspie, who are a little hot-headed at times, had to learn to come down a little bit. And I feel like the four of them helped each other with this dynamic and this friend group they have because Gracelyn and Mabel and Elspie and Sarah are on these opposite sides and they were able to help each other rise up or down or whatever. And I do
Definitely.
think you did that beautifully to have um,
Thank you.
these characters all be different because there's obviously characters like Sarah and Elspie who are tough but soft, Mabel and Gracelyn who are soft but have their tough moments, and then there's characters like the King and Briggs and Zane or Rochelle who can be downright cruel. Then there's
Yeah.
characters like Letty, Jenny, and Marie who, yeah, they're not exactly nice. They're definitely mean girls, but they're definitely at the same time not on the same level as the others, you know?
Oh no, yeah.
And then there's the queen who's definitely nice, but she is still the queen and she does show her moments of authority. And,
Yeah.
and so it's really nice to see all these varieties, especially with such a big cast, because you kind of need that with a big cast.
Thank you. They do tend to walk on with their personalities, often blaring. And I am merely attempting to capture it. They direct everything. I'm just sort of following them around with a notebook.
That's what I'm always trying to tell my mom because she's still mad about me about a death I caused in my first book. And then I'm like,
Oh my
my
God.
character went off script, okay? He decided to kill her, not me. And she's like, you're the one writing it. I'm like, my characters have a mind of their own, okay?
So my mom has yet to forgive me for a specific death. You know which one I'm talking about in B. And it's like I remember that moment when I came to her and I was like, I think this character dies. And she was like, what? And she still hasn't forgiven me for it.
Yeah, she hasn't forgiven me for that either. Because she said it wasn't even the fact that she died because she was more of a side character. She said it was the way I killed her and the way it was just so shocking.
Oh no.
And it was such a good compliment. And it's like, I'm sorry, but I'm a little happy I broke your heart because that's my job as a writer to break your heart.
Exactly. We live off of the tears of our readers.
I remember this one day, this one character gets stabbed and it's kind of left off the first book like that, so you don't know if she survives. And I came home from work because I worked across the street, so I just walked home after work, and my mom was standing there yelling at me. I walked in the door, she's like, "How dare you kill her?"
Oh my God.
I was like, "What? I just came in home. What just happened?"
Oh my
So
gosh, you have a great mom.
thank you. Okay, last question. This interview has been a little bit longer than I figured because we kept going off topic, but I'm okay with it because I love chatting with you and I love talking about your series.
Well, I love talking to you and talking to you about your books, and it means so much that you love my series.
Question 20. What are you most excited for readers to read once it's published?
All of it. Every single part of it. I am looking forward to people getting to know more about the Queen and the Queen's story, what she's been through, who she is, especially because you get to learn about who she is outside of the title of Mother and Queen, which you haven't really gotten to see yet. and you get to see a lot of what's made her who she is. So I'm really excited for that. I'm really excited for readers to read book 4 when morning comes, which picks up where B leaves off. So you get to see a good deal of the characters you've come to love in B, and a good deal of the characters you've come to love in Impossible Dream, and the characters you're introduced to in the Queen's Story Where the Heart Is all converge together. And you get to learn so much more about the individual kingdoms too, which I'm really excited about. Because it's a whole world. There's like, it's a whole thing. I'm really excited to have readers read the short story collection and get to have more about the other characters that you haven't really gotten to see as fleshed out as perhaps you would have liked or I would have liked. I'm really looking forward to the fairy tale collection where you get to learn so much more about the world in general and these kingdoms. And so much of the fairy tales have influenced the history and the politics between these kingdoms that have really influenced all of the characters right down to their very individual lives and their smaller stories. So I'm looking forward to that too.
I'm very much looking forward to books 3 and 4 to see more of, the queen and her kids, and seeing all that leading up to B, and then also seeing the events of after B, because I still want to know what happened after that. I still also haven't forgiven you for that thing your mom hasn't forgiven you for, so
Thank you. I am glad that my character means that much.
ah, oh my gosh, that character is just amazing. I love them. But yeah, so I am so excited for both books to see more of the past and more of the future, present, whatever you want to call it. I'm very excited for it. Do you have any more books planned after that besides the short story collection, or will book 4 be the last one?
Currently there's not really anything planned after that at this point. That is probably subject to change. There is one story that has the possibility of being too long for the short story collection. That that might be turned into another book, depending.
Interesting. Well, I'm very excited for both of them. Do you have any idea when they might be published or when you might be finished with them?
The current goal is to finish writing book 3 by the end of next year. And if that is the case, then there's the possibility of a 2025 publication for
That's
Way of
too far away.
I know.
Too far away.
It all depends on how quickly I can write and life in general. Life
Yeah,
in general has a tendency to throw lovely wrenches into things.
yeah, I definitely get that. It can be hard with life. Like, I have so many ideas planned, not just with my current series, even though I have a lot of ideas for that. Obviously, I have the main trilogy, the prequel trilogy, plus the prequel novellas. Then I have the Chris's Light sequel duology. Then I have 2 other series that I'm very excited for that I want to get to eventually, plus a standalone novel, which I actually have to work on next week, because it's kind of a tribute to my dad, who
That's
passed
so
last year.
awesome.
And it's going to be a Scooby-Doo retelling, so that's a little bit different.
Oh my gosh, that sounds
Yes,
fantastic.
and I want to publish it on his birthday next year, so I really need to get a crack on that. It's October 30th, so
I will keep my eye out for that one.
awesome. I'll probably be tweeting about it once I start working on it, but that's something I'm excited for, because it's a little different than what I normally do, because I don't usually write retellings or anything, but I'm very excited for it because I have some good plans for it.
I'm so looking forward to it. I'm so excited. I also have, outside of this series, a couple novellas I am hoping to publish next year, as well as a slew of children's books.
Ooh. I like what you said in one of your tweets where you like your, well, how did you say, your eyes were bigger than, I don't remember how you phrased it, but when you were talking
My
about how
eyes
you,
are bigger than my stomach,
yes,
which is
about
accurate description for everything I do.
because you were talking about, how many books you wanted to publish next year. And it's like, I feel the same way because there's so many things I want to publish next year, but
Yeah.
I know I won't be able to do them all. Like the novellas, I think I can finish because they usually can pop out pretty quickly if I actually have the time to write them.
Yeah.
Like the fifth novella, I want to finish very soon so I can send it off to you, and then I want to publish it by the end of the year. And then this will be the last book to publish, but I have to hurry up and finish it, and I'm trying. But you know how work is and stuff, and with today's
Yeah.
overtime, I ended up not writing as much as I wanted to. But I'm hoping, we'll see, no promises, but I'm
Fingers
hoping to get it
crossed.
published by the end of the year. Um, and then I want to publish the other 5 novellas next year. And then I obviously want to work on the prequel trilogy plus the Christmas Light sequel duology plus the Scooby Doo retelling. That one I definitely have to get out next year because of the reasoning behind it. But so yeah, there's a lot I want to do, and I know I probably won't be able to, but we shall see.
Fingers crossed. And best of luck.
Yes, we will both need it.
Yes.
But it's been fun chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. This has been fabulous. I really appreciate it, and I'm so honored to have this opportunity, and I cannot begin to tell you what it means that you love my books this much.
I would love to have you back when books 3 or 4 are published.
Absolutely, I would be so thrilled to do that.
Awesome. So you can just that's what I was gonna say. But I'm very excited for both books 3 and 4 and the short story collection. I cannot wait for any of them. And yeah, so I hope to finish An Impossible Dream next week. I think I'll be able to, especially since I have been reading it like during breaks at lunch and at work and stuff, which has helped me read more despite working, because you know how working can be.
Oh, yeah.
But I have been able to read a decent amount because I've been doing that, and I have been loving your story so much. So I'm so excited to finish it. I'm a little sad to finish it now since I won't get book 3 until 2025. But oh well, because you know that feeling where it's like you want to finish a book, but you also
Yes.
because you want to see how it ends, but you don't want to finish it because then it ends. It's like
I totally understand that.
that's how I feel right now. But again, thank you for coming, and I will talk to you later. You can always find me at Twitter.
Definitely, I will see you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone who came and joined us. It was a lovely chat. And until next time.
Bye.